Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a supernatural horror film named Evil Dead Rise. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The film begins with three young individuals venturing into a suburban woodland for a day out. Jessica, who suffers from motion sickness, immediately flops onto the bed upon reaching the campsite. Her friend Teresa is worried about her and decides to check on her. Pulling back the curtain, Teresa finds Jessica lying motionless. She tries to wake her up, but Jessica doesn't respond, as if she hasn't heard anything. Seeing this, Teresa decides to keep her company, settling down and starting to read her book. Suddenly, Jessica's body begins to convulse. She abruptly sits up, eerily reciting the contents of Teresa's book. A chill runs down Teresa's spine. She quickly closes the book and rushes to check on Jessica, only to find her tumbling off the bed. Jessica begins to vomit a liquid. When Teresa tries to help her, Jessica grabs her by the throat, her other hand entwined in Teresa's hair, ripping off half of Teresa's scalp. In agony, Teresa manages to escape the room, collapsing in front of their friend, who is too stunned to understand what's happening. Jessica staggers out after her, making her way to the edge of a lake. She picks up a drone and, using its propellers, slashes her own neck before plunging into the water. The friend jumps into the lake in a desperate attempt to save her. Teresa tries to stop him, but it's too late. She watches in horror as Jessica brutally kills him in the water. After that, Jessica emerges from the water, a sinister smile on her face as she stares at Teresa on the shore, indicating Teresa's impending doom. The scene shifts to an apartment about to be vacated. The woman, Ellie, resides here. She is a tattoo artist and is raising her three children alone after a bad breakup, living a life of financial strain. With the impending move, she's concerned about finding a new home for her kids. Just as she's grappling with this problem, her sister Beth unexpectedly shows up seeking Ellie's assistance. Beth is currently a singer at a local bar, but has discovered she's pregnant and the child's father is nowhere to be found. Helpless, Beth turns to Ellie for support. An already overwhelmed Ellie reluctantly lets her sister stay. Ellie's children include her son, Danny, who aspires to be a DJ, frequently filling the house with loud music. Her eldest daughter, Bridget, is a high school student, while her youngest, Cassie, is a grade schooler with an imagination that runs wild. We can see that Cassie fashions a doll's head onto a stick to fend off imaginary demons. Looking after these three children has left Ellie exhausted, and Beth's arrival only adds to her troubles. But Ellie has no choice but to press on. To celebrate the arrival of their new baby sister, she sent the three children out to buy pizza. On their way home, they passed through an underground parking lot when suddenly an earthquake hit. The ground began to shake and the overhead lights flickered incessantly. Startled, Cassie dropped her soda and ran to her older siblings. They all prepared to sprint towards home, but the ground cracked open beneath them. They had no choice but to find a place to take cover. The earthquake was over in an instant, and thankfully, none of them were hurt. It was at this point that Danny noticed a basement appearing beneath the cracked ground. Driven by curiosity, Danny climbed down and discovered a surprisingly expansive space with two rooms. In the first room, Danny found a pile of envelopes, a photograph of a priest, and several CDs, which he put into his bag before continuing to explore. The second room was filled with crosses, and in the center of it all was a coffin. The earthquake had shaken the coffin, creating a large hole in it. Peering inside, Danny saw not a body, but a mysterious ancient book wrapped up, seeming to writhe from within. As Danny unwrapped the book, countless insects flew out from it. Once the insects dispersed, the mysterious ancient book finally revealed itself. Without giving it much thought, Danny stuffed the book into his bag and brought it home. Due to the earthquake, mobile signals were disrupted, and Ellie couldn't contact her children. She went out in search of them. Upon seeing them emerge from the elevator, Ellie finally settled. Danny returned to the room, retrieving an ancient book and a disc to start his research. Bridget noticed this and urged her brother to put them back, as she felt an uncanny aura emanating from the old book. But Danny shrugged her bullshit off. He planned to open the book and sell it to ease their mother's financial burdens, because he saw the book as a valuable antique. Despite his sister's objections, Danny insisted on unwrapping the sharp pieces covering the book, but he cut his finger. The blood dripped onto the book's surface and was instantly absorbed. The next moment, the pieces on the books separated on their own. Bridget sensed something was wrong and tried to persuade Danny to throw the book back into the basement, but he stubbornly proceeded. Upon opening the book, he found it filled with many frightening illustrations, each one chilling to the bone. Afterward, Danny placed the disc into the player. A man's voice emanated from it, introducing himself as a priest who had come across the ancient book and intended to study it, documenting his research process. Danny learned the book was known as the Book of the Dead, a malevolent tome made from human flesh, imprisoning a demon within. The ancient book started flipping pages on its own. Danny was frightened, unaware that his blood had awakened the demon inside. The demon then took control of the elevator, giving Ellie a brutal ride, and invaded her body. Possessed, Ellie returned home in a strange manner, turned on the gas stove, and started cooking. She threw an egg into the pan and kept stirring it. A creepy smile spread across her face. Bridget and the others were petrified. Beth approached to ask what was happening, but Ellie responded nonsensically, spouting weird phrases. The next second, she dropped to her knees and lunged at them. Beth hastily retreated. After a brief chase, Ellie stopped, vomited a large amount of liquid, and then collapsed on the floor. Beth called for Danny, and they attempted to take Ellie to the hospital, but the elevator was already broken. Left with no choice, they carried Ellie back into their apartment and placed her on the bed. At that moment, two neighbors heard the commotion and rushed over to help, joining in prayer for Ellie. Afterward, the two set out to break open the fire escape to get Ellie to a doctor. Unfortunately, the entire apartment complex was under demonic control and they couldn't escape. Beth was at a loss. She ran to her sister's bedside and broke down in tears. Suddenly, a sound came from Ellie's phone beside her, followed by the screen shattering. A fly landed on Ellie's eyeball, and her eyelid twitched before she abruptly sat up, startling Beth. The children ran over at the sound to see what was happening. Beth stepped forward to touch Ellie and found her body was burning hot. Together, they managed to place Ellie in the bathtub to cool her hot body down. Unexpectedly, upon contact with water, Ellie's body started to contort and struggled incessantly. She then levitated out of the tub, crawling towards Beth in a strange position, mouth wide open, roaring like a goose. The frightened children ran out of the room to escape the noise. Soon, Ellie emerged, holding shards of shattered glass, charging towards Beth. The latter promptly stepped back and raised her hand to shield herself, only to have the shards pierce her palm. Seeing this, Bridget shouted in protest. So Ellie redirected her attack to Bridget, pinning her to a table. She picked up a tattoo needle, preparing to drive it into Bridget's eyeball. Fortunately, Bridget turned her face to block the attack. Bridget's distressing cry attracted the attention of their neighbor, who was trying to break open the fire escape. Not understanding the situation, he called out to Ellie. The demon was drawn to him, lunging and savagely feasting on him, sending him straight to meet Jesus. Another neighbor, a dying old man carrying a malfunctioned shotgun, rushed over, only to be killed by Ellie before he could even fire a shot. Beth closed the front door and barricaded it. Ellie persistently pounded on the door, each knock sounding like the death knell from hell. Beth peered out through the peephole like a peeping Tom, only to see Ellie staring back at her with a terrifying smile. In fear, she opened the window to seek help from outside. Coincidentally, an old scavenger was passing by below, but due to her chicken voice, Beth's cries for help were ineffective. Just then, Bridget noticed how much her mother resembled a photo in the ancient book. Bridget suspected that the transformation was due to the ancient book that Danny had brought home. Danny continuously apologized to Bridget, but she refused to accept it. A conflict erupted between the siblings. Beth intervened just in time, pulling the two apart and calming them down. In the process, Beth also learned about the ancient book. She went into Danny's room and opened the Book of the Dead. The content inside sent chills down her spine. Danny then revealed the secrets of the book to Beth and produced an unfinished disc. Meanwhile, Bridget retreated to her room to clean the wounds on her face. Suddenly, her wounds began to split open and black blood started flowing from her. Not knowing what was happening, she ran to the kitchen to rinse her mouth and wash her face. Suddenly, she felt something in her throat, followed by a pile of filth that she vomited out, full of squirming worms. Upon hearing her mother's call, Cassie came to the front door and looked outside through the peephole. The demon seemed to sense who was on the other side and began to speak to Cassie in Ellie's voice, tricking her into opening the door. So Cassie unlocked the door. The next second, a large hand reached in, trying to grab Cassie. Fortunately, Beth and Danny heard the commotion and came running. Beth gave a swift kick to the demon's hand, managing to drive it back and relock the door. Danny and Cassie returned to their room to comfort each other. Just then, Beth heard a noise from the kitchen. She cautiously went to check and found Bridget squatting on the stove. Beth called out to her. Bridget slowly turned around and she was ceaselessly chewing on a glass cup. Clearly, Bridget had been possessed by the demon. She flashed a terrifying smile and spat a mouthful of blood onto Beth's face before grabbing a knife and crawling towards her. Beth fought back, kicked Bridget away, and threw a hammer at her. But Bridget was unharmed. She picked up the hammer and struck Beth's leg. In an instant, a piercing pain engulfed Beth. But she didn't give up, reaching out for anything nearby to throw at Bridget. Finally, she managed to knock Bridget down. Upon hearing the noise, Danny rushed over. But Bridget stood up and chased after him. He ran back into his room, but Bridget broke in. The moment she saw Cassie, she switched her target. Seeing this, Cassie held up a stick in confrontation. The possessed Bridget charged forward, causing the stick to be pierced through her brain. Bridget barely pulled it out, but didn't last long before she collapsed onto the floor. Cassie was frightened, and Beth stepped forward to comfort her. After that, Beth went to Danny's room, intending to listen to the latter part of the disc, hoping to find a way to eradicate the magic. But the player was damaged in the previous fight. Luckily, Beth managed to repair it. She inserted the disc, and as it started to spin, the voice of a priest came from within. It turns out the priest used his blood to open the Book of the Dead and summon the demon within, attempting to converse with it. However, the demon was bloodthirsty and powerful, and the priest couldn't control it. In the end, the priest regretted releasing the demon and warned future generations to step away from the book, saying that the demon can't be destroyed unless its body is shattered and sealed back into the Book of the Dead. As the recording played, Ellie at the door seemed to sense something and became restless. Even Bridget, who had passed out, stood up and pounced at Cassie in the room. To save his sister, Danny stabbed Bridget in the abdomen, causing the blood to gush out. Unaffected, Bridget charged at Danny, pulled out the knife, and stabbed it into Danny's arm. Just then, blood spurted from Bridget's mouth, drenching Danny's face. Danny screamed in terror. Then Bridget pulled out the knife from Danny's arm, ready to end him. Danny grabbed the gas cylinder, lit it, and aimed at Bridget. Instantly, Bridget was engulfed in flames, struggled for a bit, and then collapsed on the floor. In the room, Beth finished listening to the recording, falling into despair because the priest didn't mention how to shatter the demon and send it back into the book. At that moment, Ellie sneaked into the room through the ventilation duct. Beth, noticing Ellie's reflection in the glass behind her, grabbed the scissors off the floor without hesitation, stabbing Ellie in the neck. But within a second, Beth was thrown out of the room by Ellie. It was then that Beth noticed the dying Danny and rushed to check on him. Looking at Cassie hiding under the table, Danny apologized to her before closing his eyes. Before Beth could even grieve, she was pinned down by the pursuing Ellie, who choked her, sniffing her smell all the way down to her abdomen. Realizing that Beth was pregnant, the demon prepared to extract the child from her belly. Just then, Cassie came to the rescue by throwing a knife to Beth, who quickly grabbed it and struck Ellie in the forehead. Seizing the opportunity, Beth dragged Cassie out of the room and into the hallway, trying to break the lock on the fire exit, but to no avail. She then noticed a shotgun in the hands of the neighbor. She picked it up and aimed at the lock. Before she could fire, the recovered Ellie charged at her. Beth turned and shot Ellie in the leg, then quickly reloaded the shotgun, intending to deliver the final blow. Seeing this, the demon transferred its host to the neighbor, who grabbed Beth's leg, causing her to miss her shot and hit Ellie's arm instead. Seeing this, Beth swung the butt of the gun at the neighbor's face. However, the terror of the demon was far from over. All the dead rose again, roaring at Beth. Seeing this, Beth pulled Cassie into the elevator, which started working again. The elevator descended rapidly, but blood began to seep in, quickly flooding it. Luckily, the elevator reached the parking lot just in time, and the opening doors allowed the blood to rush out, saving Beth and Cassie. Beth quickly woke up Cassie, got her into a car, and drove toward the exit. In their panic, they drove the car's rear wheel into a pit, leaving it unable to move forward. The iron door behind them began to shake. The demon reappeared to flex its figure, this time piecing together all the bodies to form a monstrous entity that crawled towards the car. Beth and Cassie hid on the other side of the car. Tension filled the air as Beth slowly moved, trying to locate the demon. But the sudden appearance of the demon startled Beth, who then pulled Cassie to the rear of the car, using it to play a game of hide and seek with the demon. At that moment, Beth noticed that the main gate leading outside was about to close. It was their only chance of survival. So Beth and Cassie made a mad dash for the gate. Right before the gate shut, Beth managed to leap through the gate with Cassie. Unexpectedly, the demon appeared out of nowhere, seizing Cassie by the leg and dragging her back. The demon then threw her into a car and picked up a chainsaw that was on the vehicle, advancing towards Cassie. Beth smashed a nearby chain link fence and rushed back, firing a shot at the demon to draw its attention. Cassie seized the opportunity to crawl underneath the car. The demon turned to attack Beth, throwing the chainsaw at her. Beth stumbled backward to avoid the weapon, but in the process, she slipped, falling to the ground with her gun. The demon closed in, grabbing Beth and attempting to drag her into the wood chipper. In the nick of time, Cassie stood up and cut the power to the wood chipper. After breaking free from the demon's grasp, Beth picked up the chainsaw from the ground. She signaled Cassie to turn the wood chipper back on, and then charged at the demon. In that way, they managed to dismember the demon. In the end, the demon's physical form dissolved into a cloud of blood, flying through the air. Beth left the scene with Cassie. After some time had passed, a female tenant from the apartment arrived at the underground parking lot. She was Jessica, the possessed girl from the beginning of the movie. It's shown that the demon was not vanquished, but simply found a new host, continuing its deadly game. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.